The courtroom was suffocating in silence. Each second dragged like an eternity, every creak of the wooden floor cutting through the stillness like a blade. All eyes were locked on one man, Sean Diddy Combs, who sat motionless at the defense table. His orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame, but his clenched fist told a different story. Pale knuckles pressed against each other as he stared directly at the judge's bench, where Aaron Silbermanian sat towering above, preparing to decide his fate. The air felt heavy, almost unbreathable. Then came the moment. The judge shifted his glasses, skimmed the pages before him, and finally fixed his piercing gaze on Diddy. His voice thundered across the courtroom. "Mr. Combs, before I deliver my decision, you will have one final chance to speak. Choose your words carefully." Every person in the room turned in unison, eyes drilling into Diddy. Prosecutors leaned back in their seats, arms folded, their faces stern with expectation. His legal team leaned in desperately, whispering in rushed tones, reminding him of the carefully scripted statement they had rehearsed for weeks. But Diddy didn't flinch. His body was rigid, his jaw locked tight, and his eyes froze on the judge as though nothing else around him existed. Slowly, he leaned forward, the chains on his wrists rattling faintly as he rested his cuffed hands on the cold wooden table. He inhaled deeply, the sound shaky yet deliberate, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried the raw weight of a man stripped to his core. "Your Honor, I built my world from the ground up. I gave everything to this culture, to my family, to my people. They've called me a mogul, a leader, untouchable. But right now, sitting here with everything gone, I've come to realize something I never thought I'd admit. I am nothing more than a man." A ripple ran through the crowd. Gasps broke out in hushed tones, reporters' pens scratching furiously to capture each word. At the back of the room, his mother trembled quietly, her tears sliding down unnoticed by anyone but those nearest to her. Members of his circle sat stiff, their faces empty, some pressing lips together to hold back emotion while others couldn't bear to raise their heads. Still, Diddy's voice cut through the tension, trembling yet growing heavier with each passing sentence. "I know the world has been watching, waiting for this exact moment. Some prayed for this downfall, but here I stand, ready to take what comes. I've made mistakes, yes, grave ones, but I refuse to be painted as a monster they want me to be." He paused suddenly, lowering his gaze to the table as silence consumed the room once more. The stillness was so thick that every soul leaned forward, desperate for the next word. "Before I continue with what came next in this breathtaking courtroom drama, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, because you don't want to miss the shocking turns that follow. Now, let's return to the scene." Diddy raised his head again, this time with a new fire in his eyes. His voice surged with sorrow, anger, and defiance all at once. "I've been judged inside this courtroom, but also outside of it, by the media, the streets, the people who once praised me. My name dragged, my legacy shattered before I ever had the chance to defend myself. And maybe, to some, that's justice. But I want the truth to live beyond the headlines." For the first time, even the prosecutors seemed frozen, their smug confidence shaken. The judge, stoic as ever, betrayed no emotion, but his eyes never wavered from Diddy's face. Then came the line that shifted the air entirely. Almost in a whisper, Diddy said, "If everything I built ends here, let it at least remember that I stood before you as a man and spoke my truth." The gallery held its breath. A silence heavier than any before blanketed the courtroom. No one moved. No one spoke. But every person in that room knew, whatever came next, the weight of those words would linger forever. The heartbreak, the weight, and the dread of what the judge might say next pressed down like a storm. Every gaze in the courtroom clung to Diddy as the silence grew unbearable. The hum of the ceiling fan, the scratching of a pen, even the faint murmurs outside the doors, all of it melted away. In that suffocating moment, there was nothing but him, the judge, and the crushing shadow of his past choices. Slowly, Diddy leaned forward, placing both cuffed hands on the polished defense table. His wrists trembled, chains rattling faintly, but when he spoke, his voice, soft yet cutting, sliced through the stillness. "Your Honor, I know the world sees me a certain way. I've read the headlines. I've heard the names. Predator, manipulator, criminal. I can't escape those words. They follow me even when I close my eyes. He paused, his chest tightening with uneven breaths, his lips trembling as though holding back more than just words. Behind him, his mother buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In the gallery, a lifelong friend wiped away tears, whispering a prayer that barely escaped his lips. Diddy turned slightly, locking eyes with the reporters scribbling in their notebooks, and his voice sharpened with a new edge. The world convicted me before I ever stood here. They judged me on rumors, on whispers behind closed doors. They built a story I was never allowed to defend against. And now I'm sitting here inside their version of the truth. Prosecutors shifted uncomfortably, their confident facades cracking under the rawness of his words. For the first time, even they seemed caught off balance. Diddy lowered his gaze, jaw tightening, and whispered almost to himself, "You all want me to be the villain. Maybe that's easier. Maybe believing I'm a monster makes sense of the chaos. But I am not who they painted me to be. I am more than these charges. More than this trial." Closing his eyes, he released a long, shaky breath, his voice softer now but piercing through every corner of the room. "I've made mistakes. I've done things I'll regret for the rest of my life. I'll own that. But I've also built something bigger than myself. I've lifted others up. I've given back. And no matter what happens today, that part of me doesn't die in here." In the front row, one reporter scribbled wildly, shaking her head as though she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Another leaned toward his colleague and whispered, "This isn't the Diddy we've known. This is different." And then, for the first time, Diddy's voice cracked. Struggling to hold back tears, he forced the words out. "If this is the last chance I'll ever have to speak, I want my children to know I fought. I stood here, face to face with judgment, and I didn't run. Whatever happens, let them remember this. I never stopped fighting for my name." A ripple of gasps moved through the courtroom like a wave. His words sank into the silence, heavy as stones dropping into a bottomless ocean. At the bench, Judge Aaron Subramanian sat motionless, hands folded, eyes fixed coldly on Diddy. Not a twitch, not a flicker of expression crossed his face. The silence was unbearable, stretching tighter and tighter around every heartbeat in the room. And then Diddy straightened, his spine rigid, his voice louder now, filled with conviction that rang against the walls. "Whatever you decide today, Your Honor, remember this. I am not the man they made me out to be." The gallery froze, tension gripping every soul in the room. This was no longer just a statement. It was a plea, raw and unfiltered, delivered from a man stripped of all his armor. The silence that followed was painful, suffocating. People had come expecting arrogance, excuses, another performance. Instead, they watched a man laid bare, his voice echoing with heartbreak, defiance, and truth. And as Judge Subramanian's piercing stare remained locked on him, one thing became clear. Whatever word came next would change everything. The judge's face stayed like stone, cold, unreadable. He rested his chin lightly on clasped hands, studying Diddy with a silence that felt endless. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate, each word striking like steel. "Mr. Combs, you've spoken your piece. But words do not erase actions." The sentence wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room like a blade. Diddy's jaw tightened. His attorney whispered quickly in his ear, but Diddy didn't flinch. His stare never left the bench, locked on the man about to decide his future. Across the aisle, the prosecutor rose slowly, every click of her heels echoing like a countdown. In her hands, a thick binder marked with red tabs. She turned toward the judge, her voice sharp, precise, unforgiving. "Your Honor, nothing, Mr. Combs, that changes the evidence before this court. The testimonies, the sealed files, the documented records, they all tell one story. A man who used wealth and fame to place himself above the law for decades. That ends today." Murmurs erupted in the gallery. Behind Diddy, his mother shook her head violently, clutching her rosary until her knuckles turned white, whispering through tears, No, that's not true." Diddy's attorney jumped to his feet, his voice urgent, desperate. "Your Honor, this is not a man without compassion. Yes, he is flawed, but he has built communities, created opportunities, changed lives. He has already suffered more than enough. We beg this court for leniency." Judge Subramanian raised his hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. His voice thundered, commanding silence. "Counselor, I will not entertain arguments that attempt to minimize the severity of these crimes. This is not about wealth or status or contributions. This is about accountability." The gallery froze, the weight of his words pressing down like iron. Even the reporters stopped scribbling, holding their breath in the thickening tension. The prosecutor stepped closer, her tone dropping darker now, heavy with conviction. "Your Honor, this is about the victims, the silenced voices, the people who were forced to live in the shadows of Mr. Combs's empire. Their pain deserves to echo louder than his legacy ever did. For them, we demand the maximum sentence allowed by federal law." The gallery gasped in unison, shock rippling through the room. Diddy's lips parted slightly, his eyes widening as he shifted in his chair. His cuffed hands clenched tighter, knuckles bone-white. Leaning toward his attorney, his whisper caught on the microphones. "They are trying to bury me alive." His lawyer's pale face said it all. There was no miracle left in the files before him. The courtroom felt ready to erupt. The demand for the maximum sentence hung in the air like thunder refusing to fade. Reporters gripped their pens so hard they nearly snapped. Camera flashes burst through the glass doors like lightning. Diddy sat rigid, sweat glistening under the harsh lights, his expression caught between pride and panic. Behind him, his mother's muffled sobs refused to stop. His attorneys flipped desperately through folders, as though some hidden lifeline might still appear. But then everything shifted. The prosecutor placed a sealed folder on the bench, stamped confidential in bold red letters. Stepping closer, she spoke with chilling precision, her words slicing cleaner than a scalpel. "Your Honor, inside these files are statements from federal witnesses, people too terrified come forward until now. Their testimonies confirm years of intimidation." The prosecutor's words landed like dynamite. Concealed payments, intimidation, secret deals. The gallery gasped in unison, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Even Diddy's attorneys froze mid-motion, their arguments dying in their throats. Diddy whipped his head toward his lead lawyer, his whisper sharp and panicked. "This wasn't supposed to be here. Where did this come from?" His lawyer's silence was louder than any answer. Judge Subramanian raised a hand for order. His voice cut through the chaos like thunder. "This courtroom will remain silent." He adjusted his glasses and began flipping through the sealed testimonies. Each page he turned weighed heavier than the last, his expression shifting from neutral to grim. The silence grew unbearable until the prosecutor spoke again. Her words hit like a blade to the chest. "Your Honor, these statements are accompanied by audio recordings, conversations between Mr. Combs and his circle, witnesses, payments, cover-ups." The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, reporters scribbling furiously. Outside, news alerts hit every major outlet. Diddy's mother cried out, clutching the bench as if it could hold her world together. His entourage lowered their heads into trembling hands. And Diddy, once untouchable, sat frozen, his jaw clenched, his lips pale and bloodless. For a man who built an empire, this was a fall with no bottom in sight. Judge Subramanian closed the folder with deliberate care, folding his glasses, and leaned forward. His voice carried a weight that smothered every sound in the room. "Mr. Combs, if these recordings are admitted, this isn't just a verdict you're facing. It's a life sentence." The gallery erupted again, a storm of gasps and shouts colliding with the sound of U.S. Marshals stepping forward, hands at their holsters, ready for chaos. Diddy's head lowered slightly, the reality pressing down like 1,000 bricks. For decades, he'd been untouchable. Now, he was cornered by his own past. And yet, the most shocking moment was still to come, because Sean Diddy Combs wasn't finished. The judge leaned back, stone-faced. "Mr. Combs, you've spoken enough. Unless you have anything further, we will proceed to sentencing." Every reporter leaned forward, pens gripped like weapons, waiting. And then, it happened. Diddy inhaled deeply, rising to his feet. The chains rattled with a chilling echo that commanded silence. He placed his cuffed hands flat on the table, his eyes glassy but burning with defiance. His voice cut through the room, raw and unfiltered. "You want my final words, Your Honor? Fine. Here they are." The gallery froze. Prosecutors held their breath. Cameras clicked in rapid fire. Diddy scanned the room, the prosecutors, the reporters, his family, his team, before locking eyes with the judge. His voice deepened, carrying weight with every syllable. I know the world wants me buried. I know the headlines are already written. But hear me when I say this. I am not the man they made me out to be. Gasps rippled through the gallery. His chest heaved as his voice cracked, but he pressed on. I've made mistakes, more than I can count. But I built something. I gave people hope. Families, communities, opportunities. That truth matters, even if no one here wants to see it. His mother's sobs broke the silence. Tell them, Sean, tell them. Diddy's gaze hardened. His voice thundered now, echoing across every inch of the courtroom. You can take my freedom. You can take my money. You can drag my name through the dirt. But you will not erase who I am. You will not erase what I built. I am still Sean Combs, and I will still stand. The entire courtroom froze. Not a sound, not even the faint scratch of a pen. Judge Subramanian blinked slowly, his face unreadable, but his eyes gave away a flicker of recognition. The silence was suffocating, every second dragging heavier than the last. Then, breaking the stillness, Diddy leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, cutting whisper. If you lock me away forever, make sure it's enough, because this won't be the end of my story. His words sliced through the air like a blade, leaving reporters gasping, hands racing across notepads as cameras outside lit up in a frenzy. His mother wept uncontrollably. His team shifted uneasily, and even the marshals exchanged wary glances. In that moment, Sean Diddy Combs wasn't just another defendant. He became a man standing toe-to-toe with the system itself, daring it to crush him completely. But the judge remained still, unmoved. Slowly, he lifted the sentencing papers, setting them down on the bench with chilling finality. The entire gallery held its breath. Diddy's words lingered, echoing off the wood-paneled walls like a warning that wouldn't fade. His voice, sharp, raw, trembling, had shifted the entire energy of the trial. Everyone knew this wasn't just sentencing anymore. This had turned into a showdown. Judge Aaron Subramanian sat frozen in authority, hands folded, eyes locked on Diddy as silence stretched until it became unbearable. Reporters leaned forward, knuckles whitening around their pens. Members of Diddy's circle didn't move a muscle, caught between fear and disbelief. The packed courtroom was so quiet that the faintest sound would have shattered it. And then, finally, the judge's voice cut through, measured, deep, and merciless. Mr. Combs, your words are heard, but this court does not bend to speeches. This isn't about who you think you are. It's about what you've done. His words struck like a blade, unrelenting. Before Diddy could speak again, the prosecutor rose, binder clutched in hand, heels cracking against the marble floor. She turned to face the judge, her tone icy and deliberate. Your Honor, this is exactly why we ask for no leniency. Mr. Combs speaks of legacy and reputation, but the record shows manipulation, intimidation, concealment, and abuse of influence. A man who's lived as if untouchable cannot now be granted mercy. We demand the maximum penalty allowed under federal law. Gasps shot through the crowd. Diddy's mother clutched her chest, her broken whispers of his name echoing softly. Diddy's attorney jumped to his feet, his tone desperate, cutting through the weight of the moment. Your Honor, this is not justice, it's vengeance. The prosecution wants to bury my client alive without recognizing what he has built. Mr. Combs has created opportunities, supported communities, and given back to an industry that thrived off his work. We are not asking for absolution. We are asking for balance, for fairness. The judge lifted a hand, silencing the room once more. His gaze flickered between both sides before settling back on Diddy. For a second, it felt like the walls closed in on him. Mr. Combs, the judge said, his tone low but edged with steel, you spent decades building an empire, but inside this courtroom, your empire means nothing. Here, only the law matters. Diddy's jaw tightened, his cuffed hands clenching, his breath shallow but controlled. Those words struck heavier than any verdict. The prosecutor stepped forward again, seizing the moment, her voice echoing like thunder. Your Honor, the victims desire closure. The people deserve to know justice is blind. No exceptions, no favoritism, No mercy. Her final words detonated across the courtroom, sparking a murmur that swept through the crowd. Reporters scrambled to push updates as the phrase "no mercy" exploded across social media. Diddy closed his eyes, chest heaving, every breath carrying the weight of a crumbling empire. His mother's sobs filled the background as his team stared down at the floor, unable to face what was coming. Judge Subramanian leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable but his presence suffocating. The walls seemed to close tighter. The verdict was near, and there was no way back. For Diddy, the next word would seal his fate. And as the judge reached for the sentencing documents, time itself seemed to stop. Judge Aaron Subramanian's hand hovered over the sentencing documents, a single gesture holding the fate of a man who once dominated the music world. At the defense table, Diddy sat frozen, his cuffed hands tense in his lap, jaw locked, sweat sliding down his temple. Behind him, his mother buried her face in her hands, whispering broken prayers no one could hear. His entourage leaned forward anxiously, desperate to read the judge's expression. Then, with deliberate precision, Judge Subramanian lifted the papers, adjusted his glasses, and locked eyes with Diddy. His voice was steady, cold, and merciless. "Mr. Combs, this court has reviewed every testimony, every argument, every shred of evidence. You had power. You had influence. You had privilege. But instead of using it for good, you weaponized it. And today, the law speaks louder than your legacy." The words cut like a knife, silencing the room. Then came the blow, delivered slowly, each word heavier than the last. "It is a judgment of this court that you, Sean Combs, are sentenced to 25 years in federal custody with no possibility of early release." The gallery erupted instantly, gasps, cries, and chaos exploding in all directions. Reporters bolted for the exits as breaking headlines hit the airwaves. Diddy sentenced to 25 years. The word spread like wildfire. Inside the courtroom, panic consumed the air. His mother screamed his name, collapsing into the arms of family. His lawyers shouted desperately for a stay, their voices drowned out by the uproar. And then, suddenly, everything shifted. Diddy stood, his chain clattering as he slammed his cuffed hands against the table. His chest heaved, his eyes wide, but they burned not with defeat. Something else had ignited. Slowly, he turned toward the gallery, his voice rising above the chaos. "You can cage me. You can strip my freedom. But hear me now. You will never silence me." Gasps tore through the courtroom. Reporters froze mid-stride, cameras firing like lightning. Even the marshals hesitated for a beat, unsure if he would resist. Diddy's gaze cut straight to the judge, his tone steady and booming. 25 years? Fine. But mark this day, because when I walk out of that cell, this entire system will remember my name. The crowd exploded once more, shouts, sobs, and frantic whispers colliding into pure frenzy. Judge Subramanian pounded his gavel, demanding order, but his voice was drowned in the storm. Marshals swarmed Diddy, dragging him back down, but his face didn't break. For the first time in weeks, he looked untouchable again. The realization hung in the air. The court might have stripped Sean Combs of his freedom, but they hadn't broken him. This was no ending. This was the beginning of a new war. Outside the courthouse, chaos reigned. Crowds chanting, helicopters circling, reporters shouting over one another. Screens everywhere lit up with breaking alerts. Diddy sentenced to 25 years. Diddy collapses, then erupts. Diddy's final words stun courtroom. Inside, the atmosphere still buzzed, heavy with tension even after the gavel fell. Marshals locked Diddy's chains tighter, preparing to escort him out as medics and lawyers swarmed nearby. Through tears, his mother cried out his name, nearly collapsing again as family held her upright. Reporters scrambled toward the exits, desperate to capture him on camera. But as the marshals led him out, something happened. Diddy stopped, his cuffs clinking sharply as he turned back to face the crowd. His voice, low but cutting through like a blade, carried across the room. "This isn't the end for me. 25 years? Fine. But I swear to you all, I'll survive this." Gasps hit once more. Cameras flashed wildly, freezing his face in that moment of defiance. Outside, protests roared, chants clashed with shouts, and news anchors screamed breaking updates. The world watched as Sean Combs was loaded into a black transport van, armed marshals surrounding him. Through the tinted glass, one image pierced the noise. Diddy, cuffed, his eyes fixed forward, burning with unshaken resolve. Back inside, the lead prosecutor faced reporters, her voice firm and absolute. Today, the court proved one thing: no one is untouchable. Yet even as she spoke, whispers spread about sealed testimonies, secret recordings, and names still hidden. Everyone knew this wasn't just a sentencing. It was the first spark of something much larger. The empire was stripped, the freedom gone, but for Diddy, the war had only just begun,